do you agree with that? Karma is dharma.
Yes, yes.
But when we talk about terrorists, they have a different ideology.
Hmm.
And according to them, they are also doing their karma by killing people.
Just like everybody understands the fact that honesty is the best policy, and all religions across the world, even those which are not influenced, they also believe in some of these elementary values which somehow God puts in us.
Muslims have clarity that they have to follow Quran. Christians have clarity they have to follow the commandments of Bible. Which all are the Dharam Granth of Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma.
So there is only one Granth,
Okay.
which is the final authority, and those are the four Vedas:
Okay.
Rig, Yaju, Sam, and Atharva.
Hmm.
Everything else which comes below them, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, the Upanishads, if they are saying anything against the Vedas, then that is not to be considered.
It is to be null and void.
Yes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new podcast at Vartalap Studios. Today, we have with us Uttara Nerurkar ji, who is a BTech graduate from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, embarked on a remarkable journey. Her initial career spanned 15 years in chemical engineering and software companies, including Infosys Limited. During this time, she co-authored a book on software engineering and presented research papers at international conferences. However, in 2001, Uttaraji followed her heart back to her true passion, which is Indian philosophy and Adhyatma. She immersed herself in the study of Sanskrit, Upanishads, Darshan Shastras, and other philosophical texts. Her self driven exploration, guided by dedicated teachers, led her to present papers at prestigious conferences and publish in renowned journals. She has written 5 books so far, and today we are going to talk about her latest book, The Rootless Route, which is a commentary on Sankhya Darshan. Her unique journey bridges the world of technology and ancient wisdom, making her a captivating guest for our podcast. Uttara ma'am, namaste, and we welcome you to today's podcast at Vartalab Studios.
Dhanyavad, Kushinder.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here, and little that I've heard of Vartalap and the work that it is doing, I'm really happy, and I wish the whole team the very best. So before we start, let us just say one Ved mantra and remember God. ॐ विश्वानि देव सवितर्दुरितानि परासुव यत्भद्रं तन्न आसुव ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति.
So that was very good of you to chant this mantra in the beginning of this podcast. Is there a reason? I've generally seen whenever somebody from Arya Samaj, who has the background of Arya Samaj, whenever they go to any stage or they start anything good, so they start it with Ved mantras. Is there a reason behind that?
Ved mantras, you can understand them as Mangala Charan. So whatever we are undertaking, may it be blessed by God. Everything that is bad, may that be removed, and everything that is good, may it be with us and come with whatever action we are doing.
Okay. And ma'am, I've seen your portfolio. It's a very good portfolio. You've been part of corporates also, worked with companies like Infosys. So, how come you've shifted from a corporate life to this writing world and became an author? And in doing so, you've chosen the difficult genre of writing, which is writing books on Sanatana
Yeah.
or Hindu Dharma.
Yes.
So, what was the reason of this shift?
So my father was an Arya Samaji. So from childhood, I was exposed to Arya Samaji precepts. My mother was a non-Arya Samaji, so I learnt that side as well. But when I was a teenager, he taught me a little bit of the Vedas and Upanishads. So I got introduced to that side, and I think I was always interested. Even as a child, I remember that I used to love listening to the Ramayana and Mahabharata, etc. So I had that streak in me. So I had, even though studies took over and job took over, But I knew that one day I will return to this. So it was a retirement option. So there were some health issues because of which I quit in 2001. And since then, I'm working on this. So it's like 24 years now. In
Okay.
fact, it's become now the major part of my life. It is longer than my school plus engineering studies plus my professional life.
You left your professional life around 2001, I think.
2001, yeah.
Yes, and since then you've been writing.
Writing.
And apart from writing, you've also been delivering speeches in some
And
seminars.
as well as teaching.
Okay.
So first I did self-study again because I had health issues, so I couldn't go to a university or a school or something and follow the traditional path. In a way, I must tell you that that has been good because I did not follow the beaten track. So I had the liberty of having my own ideas about things, and because I am of a scientific background, so I could bring in scientific concepts into this, and I could see that how it is matching up with the science that we had studied in school and college. So that way, I was free to take that path.
Okay.
So once I had done a certain level of self study and gained some competence in this, then I started teaching. So teaching was the first thing, and
So, sorry to interrupt, ma'am. When you're saying that you had done some sort of self-study, so was it about learning Sanskrit? Because all of this text is generally available in Sanskrit language.
So that exactly, I wanted to actually study Sanskrit as well because I wanted to read the text in original and find the meaning in original because it's so many millennia that have passed. It is 2000, 4000, 5000 years and even more which have passed since the texts were first written, and over the years the meanings have got lost. So I wanted to read it the original. So first thing I also did was to study Sanskrit, and in fact I started teaching also first Sanskrit, and then I moved on to teaching all Manusmriti and Upanishads and
So, when you're saying you're teaching right now, currently, so who is your audience?
my audience is quite small. I have people from my neighborhood who
Okay.
come to my house, and then we
Okay,
have
you
whole
teach
classes
them
there.
Sankhya Darshan and other Vedic texts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yoga Darshanam, Sankhya Darshanam, etc.
And what is the relevance of teaching them Sankhya Darshan? Is there any relevance in present?
See, the spiritual element is always relevant. Our Atma always has to progress, whichever time we live in, whichever space we live in. It will always, it is an eternal pursuit. So that part is always there, and that is the main reason why my audience comes to study these texts. Because now it is well known that the base of Hinduism is in these texts, in these Sanskrit texts. So just like Bhagavad Gita has gained popularity, these other texts also people have curiosity about.
Okay. And ma'am, just out of the contest, since you are from Arya Samaji background and I am also from the same background, when I was around 12 years old, I started going to Arya Samaj, and my mother had Arya Samaji background. Generally, this Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Sanatani, Puranic, and Arya Samaji, these are all branch of Hinduism. So, is there generally Arya Samajis are considered hardliners? So, is it true?
I'm not really equipped to answer that question whether they are hardliners or not. But yeah, sure, they stick to their values, which is fair enough because everybody else is also sticking to their values. So their value system is little different from the others in the sense that we believe in a Nirakar Paramatman, and we believe that Havan is a Vedic dharma, which must be done preferably twice a day, which even though that is not being done by most people, but at least once on Sunday it is being done.
And that also has a scientific reason. It is contributing to environment.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I would not say that they are hardliners, but
They just stick to their facts.
yeah.
And ma'am, one more question, which is very relevant. Why did you decide to write in English? Because when we talk about Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma, the audience in Hindi is larger than the English audience. So, what was the reason for opting this language, English? Was there a specific reason or?
That is a very important question, Kushvinder. So, firstly, I would like to say that out of the 5 books, 3 books are in English and 2 are in Hindi. And also, I write Masik Lekhas, monthly articles in Arya Samaji magazines.
Okay.
So, those are all written in Hindi. On my website, you will find that most of those articles are collected, and so my Hindi content is actually much larger than the English content. But coming back to why these 3 books are written in English, what I find is that there is a lot of matter available on this Adhyatma front in regional languages, and
Okay.
particularly Hindi. So, if there is a seeker who is looking for something, they have a lot of matter to read. But in English, there is a paucity of this matter. So, I wanted to fill in the gap. And I know that my friends, professionals who are there in Bangalore, they are very keen to know what is in these texts, but they are handicapped by the fact that they have lost touch with their native language or Hindi for so many years. Because of their professional life, they have lost touch with their language, and English has become their lingua franca. So I wanted to address them. And
Okay.
since I have their mindset still with me, and also I am proficient with English, so I wanted to write in English.
Okay. And even the youth today generally prefers to read in English. And it is the need of the hour that the youth should learn something from these texts.
Yes, yes.
If not in Hindi, then from the language of their preference.
Correct.
And should not be taken aback by the works that has been done by people like Macaulay,
Yes.
who did
yes.
not know about Sanskrit and they translated with
Very
us
true, very
according to their comfort.
Yes, yes.
So it was a good choice, ma'am, and I think it will benefit the youth as well as all generations. I mean, even if it is somebody who is very young or somebody who is retiring from corporate who has some interest to learn learn Hinduism,
Yeah.
so it will benefit everyone. Now,
In fact, in that direction, I have actually tried to keep my books very basic. And whatever concept I introduce, I never leave it without explaining. So anybody who even if a person does not have any background in this, they will be able to follow.
Because Vedic text is somewhat hard to understand for a normal
Yes,
person.
yes.
And when you give relevant real life examples, so it becomes easier to understand from that scenario or that context.
Yes, yes.
I've seen those examples in your book also. Now, slowly moving towards the content that is there in your book, will also touch upon some other aspects of dharma. So, first of all, ma'am, there is always a confusion about dharma. What is dharma? What is it?
So dharma is the righteous way of life. Today we associate dharma with a lot of rituals. So going to the temple, offering prayers, doing some rituals at home or in public, we associate that with dharma. But actually that is not the right thing. It is more basic, it is more personal, and it is how you behave. And it involves society actually. So for ourselves, if I had to tell you, there is no dharma. So for example, the basic element of dharma is honesty,
Okay.
satya. So when you say that satya, the major element of it is when I speak to you, I should tell you what I think, what I do, and what I believe in. And not the opposite.
There shouldn't be any sugar coating.
Any sugarcoating. So always the second person is involved. It is rarely that we are dishonest to ourselves. We could be potentially, but typically it is in relation to another person, samaj, society in general.
And ma'am, there is a very famous phrase, people say karma is dharma. So, do you agree with that? Karma is dharma?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay.
As I told you, dharma is towards another person. So that is achieved only through karma.
Okay. But when we talk about terrorists, they have a different ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Or people who are criminal involved in crimes, they have different ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And according to them, they are also doing their karma by killing people.
Mm-hmm.
So even then, do you feel that karma is dharma? Or
No,
only
that
good karma is dharma?
only good karma is dharma,
Yeah.
the righteous way of life. And this is a misconception that there are different religions for different parts of the world. It's actually one religion for mankind. So just like everybody understands the fact that honesty is the best policy, and all religions across the world, even those which are not influenced by the Vedas, by that I mean, all the Middle East and the European countries are actually all influenced by Vedic knowledge, because it had reached over there. To some extent, even China is influenced by us. But there are these, Pacific Island oceans, which Pacific Ocean islands, which are not influenced. They also believe in some of these elementary values which somehow God puts in us. So honesty being the very, very basic minimum of dharma, that is to be followed by the whole of mankind. And similarly, all other elements of dharma are for everybody, not for a particular sect living in a particular area, in a particular time, in a particular age. It's not like that.
So, in general, we can say that dharma is anything that you do with right intention that contributes towards the progress of humankind and your nation.
Yes. And
And
yourself, even.
yes, and your family, yourself.
Absolutely.
And it cannot be different for one person and for another person. It has to be same for everyone,
Everyone.
applied on everyone.
Absolutely.
If honesty is best policy for Hindus, it has to be best policy for Muslims and Christians.
Yes, yes. So there are
Yeah.
no two dharmas,
Yes. So there is one dharma.
one dharma only.
And ma'am, is it Sanatan Dharma or Sanatan Vedic Sanatan Dharma? Because Sanatan means which is from the beginning of the world.
Yes,
So people generally think that Sanatan is Dharma. Sanatan is a word that talks about the duration. And
yes,
something has been present for how long?
yes.
So it's been there since the beginning of this
Yeah.
world, and it will be there by the end of this world.
Correct.
So is it Vedic Sanatan Dharma or Sanatan Dharma?
So Sanatan Dharma by itself now also connotes the Puranic Dharma. So even those people call themselves as Sanatan Dharmi. So to distinguish from that, we add Vedic Sanatan Dharma. But per se, Dharma is always Sanatan only.
Okay. Generally, Muslims have clarity that they have to follow Quran. Uh, Christians have clarity they have to follow the commandments of Bible. When we talk about Hindus, there is a lot of confusion. There are several Purans and multiple scriptures available, and there are different sects available within Hinduism. And one sect follows some scripture, another sect follow another scripture. So there is no unified or codified system within Hinduism.
Right.
So what is the or which all are the Vedic scriptures which we can say are the Dharam Granth of Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma?
So there is only one Granth,
Okay.
which is the final authority, and those are the four Vedas.
Okay.
Okay, Rig, Yaju, Sam, and Atharva. They are the final authority. Everything else which comes below them, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, the Upanishads, if they are saying anything against the Vedas, then that is not to be considered.
It is to be null and void.
Yes, yes. So, and now, of course, in today's age, we have come so far away from the Vedas that we have no idea what the Vedas are saying. Very little, some one drop might be coming in so many sects which are there in Hinduism now. For example, this idol worship which is there, which is not at all prescribed by the Vedas, because God cannot be put in a form.
And it
that
cannot
too
be limited to a boundary.
no boundaries, nothing. So we are very far away from the original.
So Veda is generally the Dharma Granth of Hinduism.
Yes,
And if we talk about Vedang or Upang, so those are texts which help us understand Vedas in detail.
yes,
Because Vedas have been written in a different language,
yes,
as Sanskrit also have differences.
yeah,
One that is generally used in conversation and one that is used in
Vedic.
Vedas, Vedic Sanskrit.
yes,
So rishis have helped us uh, through darshana, shastra or Vedang. They have given us the kind of explanation with some real life examples, so that it becomes easier for us to understand the message of Vedas.
yes, yes.
So, going forward, ma'am, why did you choose Sankhya Darshan? And generally, people have confusion that it must be related to numbers because of Sankhya. Sankhya means, generally, people think Sankhya means Sankhya,
Correct.
and then Sankhya means number.
Yeah.
So, we would request you to let our viewers know what is Sankhya Darshan, what is the meaning, and why did you choose to write a commentary on Sankhya Darshan and its relevance in today's life.
Yeah. So answering this latter question first, um, I did not pick up Sankhya Darshan specifically. Swami Dayananda has laid out the Swami Dayananda of Arya Samaj. He has laid down the path which a seeker should take. So, if you have to study the Vedas, you cannot directly go to the Vedas as is, but you have to study some subordinate texts. So, there are the Shadangas and the Upangas, etc., etc. So, one of the section is Upangas, which are the Darshan Shastras, and there are 6 of them. So, you have to study all 6 to actually be able to understand the message of the Vedas.
Okay.
So, as a part of that, I was anyway studying all 6 Darshan Shastras. So, Sankhya Darshan I taught. And luckily, I got students who stuck with me for 2 years. So, because I had taught it, now it was my duty also to write it down. And that is why I have written this book.
Okay.
About the meaning, so Sankhya is typically confused with Sankhya. That is because in one of the sutras in the origin of the universe, 25 elements have been given as making up this universe and the body in particular. But actually, we have to take the yogic meaning over here, which is sam plus kya. So, sam means properly.
Okay.
And kya can potentially be derived from 2 roots. One is chakshing and one is kya. Together, the word means something which is understood well by seeing it, either sakshat, directly witnessing it, or by interpolation, by anuman, by derivation, and then being able to transmit it properly. So, since Kapila saw through reasoning what are the elements in the universe, how it originated, etc., he has laid it down in this text most logically.
So, what are the topics that the Sankhya Darshan cover?
So, the main objective of Sankhya Darshan is the prapti of moksha. That means to attain liberation. That is actually the objective of all the 6 Darshan Shastras, because they are all Vedic, and the ultimate goal of humanity in the Vedas is obtaining liberation from this body.
Okay.
This cycle of death and birth which we are trapped in. As a part of that, Sankhya has told us what are the 3 main elements in this universe, that is one God, many souls, and amorphous matter. So it has brought out logically why these elements should be like this, and also it has given us what is the relationship between these 3 elements.
And ma'am, this Sankhya Darshan is generally not very famous among academicians or in general, like Brahma Sutra or Yoga Darshana. Why is it not famous among them? Also, generally, this Sankhya Darshan is not very popular among academicians or in general public. Like Brahma Sutra or Yoga Darshan is famous, and it is also sometimes connected to atheism. So, is it really atheist text mentioned in Sankhya Darshan, or there is a confusion?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, the main reason why the study of Sankhya has gone down with time is because it is considered, or rather, it has been promoted as an atheistic text. And this has been mostly by the Vedantis have done this. And that is because they believe in Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. That is, there is only one entity in this world, while on the other hand, Sankhya is propounding that there are these three entities, and the logic which it is given is so difficult to refute that they don't want you to look at it.
Okay.
So, because of that, they've told you that there are two sutras in particular which are the offending sutras. That one is Ishvara Siddhe, which says because Ishwar is unproven. And similarly, there is another sutra which is there that Pramana Bhavan. No, let me just refer to this. Pramana Bhavat na tat siddhihi. That because there is no proof, therefore he does not exist. So actually, both have been read out of context. So Ishvara Siddhe actually says that the abhaya pratyaksha of yogis, that means the pratyaksha of Ishwar, which the yogis do, that must also be treated as a proof, as a praman, because otherwise God would not be siddha. God would not be proven at all. So while God is proven by the Sarvoch authority of the Vedas, still the pratyaksh praman always overrules. For us as human beings, if we have seen something with our eyes,
We'll believe it.
that is the most believable thing. So when the yogis tell us that I have seen God, then we believe that first and foremost. So that pratyaksha must also be taken as a praman, and that is what this sutra is saying.
Okay.
And the other sutra, which says that there is no praman for God and therefore he is not proven, that is actually a Purva Pakshi statement, which is saying, which is said by the counterparty that there is no praman for his. So we have to read the text properly, and this text has been misinterpreted by people like this for due to vested interests and sometimes due to ignorance, because Kapila himself says Sahi Sarvavit, Sarvakarta. So he is saying that God is the one who knows everything, and he
Who
is
does
the one
everything.
who does everything. So he has made this very, very profound declarative statement which leaves no doubt about what he thinks about who God is.
Okay. So, you also talked about root, which reminds me of the title of this book, The Rootless Root.
Yes.
So, how did you pick up this title, and can we imagine a root without without root?
Yeah. So actually, there is a sutra which comes in this text, which says "Mule mula bhavad amulam mulam." So that says that when our root is one, which does not have a root. So if you think about it, that is what a real root is. If a root has a root, then that means it is not the root, right? Even if you look directly at a plant, if a plant we are looking for the root, we don't find it, it is not the root. I mean, it has another root. And similarly, when we are doing any causal analysis, if the cause has a cause, then this cause has now become the root cause. Now we have to dig further, we have to dig further. When we reach the final cause, then that is the root. And this sutra itself is actually talking about primordial matter. So when we start looking at the transforms in this universe and start breaking them down to what should be the ultimate form of matter, then that is the mool which he is talking about in this
And
particular
ma'am, Sankhya talks about the principles of Satya Karyavad and Ashtakartavya. So,
asatkaratvam.
yeah. So, what is this? Can you shed some light on them?
Yeah, so this Sankhya sets out the law of causation. Okay, what can be the cause for any effect? In philosophy, we talk about cause and effect. Any thing that happens, there are reasons which lead to that transformation or effect. That those are the causes. Okay,
So
so
कारण के बिना कार्य नहीं.
कारण के बिना कार्य नहीं. तो ये कारण एंड कार्य, व्हाट इज देयर संबंध, what can be a karya, what can be a karan, that is given in the law of causation, upadhan niyama, which is there. So in that, this satkaryavad is the first rule, which essentially says that nothing can come out of nothing. Okay, in fact, today, Kushvinder, even scientists are coming in with these theories where they say from empty space, some two particles with come out in equal and opposite directions, and then they can also merge together and leave behind nothing, not even energy. This kind of thinking is what Kapila is saying is not correct. Nothing can come out of nothing. Always there has to be a sat, something which exists, which leads to a karya, which is an effect. So that is the one of the things. So one of the examples which he gives as part of this is that you don't find horns on the head of a person.
Of a person, yeah.
You have not found horns on the head of a person since human beings have been on this planet. So that has to say something. Why does a stag have horns? What is there which produces the horn? So when you study, there is some substrate over there below the horn which gives rise to the horn, and we don't have it. So if you are saying that you saw somebody with a horn, that is impossible, because that substrate does not exist on the head of a human being.
So after behind every creation there is a reason.
Yes. And that reason has to be specific. That is what asatkaratvam says, that it cannot be any reason. Nothing can come out of anything. Okay, so if you have to produce water, you start with hydrogen, you start with oxygen, then only you will give water. If you start with carbon and you start with get oxygen, you will get carbon dioxide, which is something completely different. So always you have to start with specific substrates in order to get a particular effect.
So, ma'am, when we go through Sankhya Darshan, we understand that it talks about Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Atma, and the creation of universe. And also talks about the elements or substances and the order in which they are used to create the universe.
Yes.
So, is there a relevance of this in modern science also?
So if you compare it with modern science, that has a different way of looking at things. While Indian scientists, if I may call, people like Kapil Seers, who probably saw a lot of these things sakshat with their own eyes, they had a different way of perceiving things. So, for example, the one of the beautiful things which is covered in Sankhya is, as you mentioned, the origin of the universe. So they believe that there was one primordial substance called Prakriti, which was there, which was amorphous and was completely uniform, but which had three flavors in it, which are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And these were present in that Prakriti in equal proportions. So therefore, it was completely uniform at the beginning of creation. And then that Prakriti starts transforming. First thing which it gives is what is called Buddhi.
Okay.
So that Buddhi is actually the subtle form of your mind. That further transforms into Ahankar.
Okay.
Now this Ahankar is a substance which I will tell you a little more in detail later. Then this sattvic part of Ahankar, the Ahankar which has more sattva in it, changes into the senses.
Okay.
Again here, Indian thinkers, they had a different perspective. So they did not look upon only the five senses which are, senses of perception, which we call Jnanendriya. So the eyes and the ears and the nose and the tongue and the skin.
Hmm.
These are the Panchendriya which, if you notice, the whole world believes in it
Yes.
because it has gone from India.
Hmm.
Okay, putting that aside, then they also believed in karmendriyas, by
Okay.
which we perform action. So they said that the two arms, the two legs, the your tongue, which speaks,
Hmm.
and two other orifices, one for your genitals and the urinary tract, and one your anus, which is your alimentary canal opening. So these also perform functions, and they are also called senses. These are senses of action, you can call them. So these
Okay.
are come out of sattvic ahankar. The other tamasic ahankar actually generates your matter.
Hmm.
Why sattvic we consider as part of India? Because sattva is related with knowledge.
Okay.
So it is related with perception.
Hmm.
So that is why the senses having perception are from your sattvic ahankar.
Hmm.
While tamas is related with ignorance, not knowing anything, being unaware of your surroundings, etc.
Okay.
So the five Mahabhutas or the Sthul Bhutas, the five elements, they arise from this tamasic ahankar. In between, we have what we may call the atoms
Okay.
of the Mahabhutas, which are called Sukshma Bhut.
Okay.
Okay, so none of these you will find in modern science until you reach the five elements. So their knowledge is kind of starting from the five elements, while ours is far deeper inside. There is a whole section which we are not able to look at. And the beauty of it is that Kapil has told this logically. And I would like to tell you and your audience through this means is that in this book I have given my own insights here,
Okay.
because till now the commentators have not been able to actually see the logic which Kapil is telling us.
And you have been a chemical engineer also.
Yes, yes.
So there is a relevance in
And so all engineers are scientists at heart. So somewhere they know science. So can I elaborate on this?
yeah, sure.
So what I have shown is that why I'm saying that commentators are not they have not understood is because Kapil has said it in very short. He has said things like sthulat pancha tanmatrasya. So from the gross elements you can discover the five subtle elements.
Okay.
The panch tanmatra.
Hmm.
Now nobody has been able to say how. Okay, and why is he starting from sthul? And why five elements only? And by the way, even five elements are believed by the rest of the world, though their elements may be different because they really don't know why five elements. Even we have actually lost that knowledge. But Kapila himself, only later on, he tells us that there are five senses.
Okay.
That is undisputed, that these five Jnanendriyas are there. And they are all orthogonal to each other. What the tongue can taste, the eye cannot see. What the eye can see, the tongue cannot taste. Okay, so they are all perpendicular to each other. They see things.
They have a different function, distinct function.
Distinct, absolutely. There is no
Correlation.
overlap between them. So therefore they said that okay, they are looking at five different things, so there must be five different things. So that is why they call these things which are the subject of the senses as the five Mahabhutas. Then they said that okay, now you have these Pancha Mahabhuta, Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jala and Prithvi. These five elements, the ancient thinkers said that if you keep cutting them, you will come to a final particle beyond which if you cut, then that element will no longer remain that element. And that they called the atom. So they said for each of these, not only the material particles, which today we understand atom only for, I would say, Jala and Prithvi. But for each one of these Mahabhutas down to Akash, you can cut and come to the smallest particle of that, which is the atom, which they call Panch Tanmatra, which is a unique concept. Nobody has ever thought of it. Now from this Panch Tanmatra and the senses, which are part of your body, and they all have a sense of I-ness in them. When we see this body, we say my hand, my eyes, my legs. So there is a aham in that. That aham is called ahankar. Where in this body, when the soul is attached to this body, it is attached to this element called ahankar. So this ahankar is not what we typically understand as ego, where we feel great and we say I did this and I did that, and that is what is typically understood as ahankar. But here in this context, ahankar actually means that element which is made of matter, which when it is connected, the soul connects with that, it starts perceiving the body as itself. So that delusion is created within the soul, which is actually such a fantastic concept. And then we come to buddhi, which is subtler than ahankar. And that buddhi, when you look at some forms of knowledge, they don't have any I-ness involved in them. So when you say the sky is blue, there is no I-ness involved in that. When you say 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, there is no I-ness involved in that. So there, our ancient thinkers said then there has to be something which is before this substance which created I-ness in the body, and that is buddhi. And between buddhi and the primordial matter, we could not identify any state which had any relevance in our body. So they said, in fact, couple discusses that should we consider some other levels as well, which they find that it's not necessary, because buddhi is the last thing which we can differentiate. And then we must say that primordial matter does exist, because all buddhis are not the same. So there is a difference, and the main axis on which they differ is on this sattva, raja and tama. Sattva refers to jnana, knowledge, and the people who are peaceful and happy, they are supposed to have greater sattva in their buddhi. Rajasic are the people who are always agitated and have to perform some actions and are also a little miserable, have some sorrow. And then you have the tamasic people who are ignorant, they like to not know anything, they are stupid, and they have lust and commit violence, etc. Those people are tamasic. So these three buddhis, which we can easily distinguish, that these are the three main partitions of buddhis, that they related to sattva, raja and tama, three flavors of primordial matter. And therefore they said that the primordial matter has to have this, and it has to be a single substance, because it goes into the buddhi.
So it is actually buddhi which distinguishes one person from another, depending on whether they are tamasic or
Yeah. The character and personality arises from the buddhi.
buddhi. Okay. And if we talk about the commentaries which are available on Sankhya Darshan, so Maharshi Dayanand Saraswati ji, during his lifetime, he started the work on Ved Bhashya, but unfortunately he could not get the time to do some work on Sankhya Darshan and other darshans. There are many Arya Samaji scholars who have done some work, and if we specifically talk about Sankhya Darshan, then Udaivir Shastri ji is one person who has done a great work.
Yeah.
How about your commentary, and how is it different from these commentators who have earlier done the work?
So, for
on Sankhya
example,
Darshan?
this logic which I have told you about this, how Kapil has derived these elements, that derivation you will not find in any other commentary. So this is, I would say, some scientific parts which I have added. And even this understanding of ahankar, you will not find in other commentaries. And I will tell you one more item which is very, very, I would say, a very great insight on
Okay.
my side, is that Kapila says multiple times
Hmm.
that um, all actions stop at the buddhi
Hmm.
or ahankar.
Okay.
Okay, the next step. So the soul does not perform action.
Hmm.
See, this does not is not acceptable to most people. In fact, I'm a little scared telling on your channel because it is not a concept which is easily understood. Because you always say that the soul performs the karmas, and the you have to accept the consequences of your karma, whether it is good or bad.
But Kapil is saying that it is not the soul that is performing the action, it is the body.
It is the body. And this you have to understand. There are two ways in which you can understand. I have given two analogies in my book. So one is that it is like a robot
Okay.
with a battery inside. So you have the whole metal robot with all the electrical this that, and it is powered by the battery. So the battery is the soul, and the rest of the things which make up the robot are the material body. So now when the robot lifts up a pen or a pencil, then is it being performed by the battery or is it being performed by the robot?
So it's being performed by the robot,
By
not
the
the
robot.
battery. Yeah.
So while the motive force is being provided by the soul, it is actually not doing that karma. Similarly, if you think of driving a car, so the car is your body, and you are the driver sitting inside the car. So you decide where the car should go, etc. But who is actually going there? The car. So till the time we are making the decisions for the body and thinking that we are the body and therefore I must go to some Dwarka in Delhi. So till that time, you will be associated. The car and the driver will be one, and you have to suffer the consequences of your karma. The day that Vivek comes in and you see the difference between the car and the driver, the car will become different. And any action which you will do only for yourself. It will not be affecting, it will not give you a phala.
You give this analogy, and we believe in karma phal. So in that way, whatever we are doing, if suppose if somebody commits a crime, so it is not the soul that is committing the crime, it is the body that is committing the crime. So then the concept of karma phal is all gone.
So I told you, till the time we do not have this Vivek.
Okay.
This Vivek is the most important part, and that is why, in fact, these Adhyatma people, they have to go into the details of matter, because then only you are now seeing you have reached that final level where the soul is connecting to the body. So till the time you are colored by your ahankar and you are seeing the body as yourself, till that time you are the body. So whatever my finger gets cut, the pain will be felt by me. Actually, the pain has stopped at the buddhi. Okay, the nerves which are going from here to my brain and informing me that there is a cut which has happened here, and therefore they're creating a sensation of pain, which is actually inside my buddhi. It stops there. The information is handed over to the soul. Now the soul, because it is so deeply believing that it is the body, it also feels the pain.
Okay.
So that is why till the time I believe I am my body, whatever action I do, it results in happiness or sorrow for me. And I have to make sure that it is a good deed if I want more happiness.
And there is a famous phrase from Sankhya Darshanam, Jnanam Muktihi. So can you elaborate this?
Yes, this is a very popular maxim which has been picked up from Sankhya, Jnanan Muktihi, which you will find pasted on a number of school mottos. On buses you will find Jnanan Mukti written over there. So what it means is that knowledge leads to liberation.
Okay.
So this, the fundamental concept which Kapil is covering in this sutra is what I have just told you, that Vivek. So when you come to know what you are yourself, then you are liberated and you attain moksha. But on the other hand, you can take it even at a lower level. So if you say that I have come to know how this disease is being caused, then you can look for a cure. Otherwise, you will never find a cure for the disease because you don't know what it is. Till we knew that bacteria causing disease, we did not have the concept of an antibiotic. But as soon as we came to know, we could develop antibiotics. Similarly, you come to know that the earth is round, then you're not scared of falling off. So you go and take a circumnavigation of the earth. You come to know that the earth has gravity, you are able to escape it. So, in all spheres of life, wherever knowledge you acquire, you can take a step forward.
Okay. And ma'am, Sankhya talks about moksha, and moksha is one of the most important aspect of Hindu philosophy, or Sanatan philosophy. Nowadays, there are multiple ways, as discussed from different thought of schools,
Yeah.
to achieve moksha.
Yes.
What does Sankhya say about it?
So, Sankhya and all Darshan Shastras, I must say, they say the same thing, that you have to come to know yourself. So, this is the technical term which Patanjali has given in Yoga Darshanam is Vivek Khyati.
Okay.
So, when you get this, Vivek means being able to determine something as different from another thing.
Okay.
So, when you are able to determine that you are different from your body and so you are able to see yourself, that is the time when you attain moksha.
When you start seeing your soul and body differently.
Differently. And so you are now you are with yourself. You know, you are always aware that this is the car and I am the driver. And you don't become the car. You no longer remain the car, I should say, because all this while we are thinking we are the car. So that is when actually you can get liberation. Till then, there is no way out. So all this which is being taught right now, like performing Nishkam Karma, this is another misconception that, Gita, the people who preach Gita keep saying, do Nishkam Karma, and that is how you will attain moksha. So, what all these texts are saying that you cannot perform Nishkam Karma till you come to know who you are. That is the time when that karma phal will go away. That is the time when you will do these deeds without any kamana. What does Nishkam means? That you do a deed without any desire. So, even if you do paropkar is typically considered Nishkam Karma, right?
Yes.
You are actually somewhere deep inside. You are one first kamna is that, okay, I am following what the Shastras are telling me. And you are looking to the fruit of that karma, that I will get some happiness or I will get mukti as a consequence of this Nishkam Karma. Even that is a kamana.
Okay.
So this is actually not a Nishkam Karma. Because whatever you make your body do.
So if it is not a Nishkam Karma, then how will we get moksha? Because it can be achieved only when you start doing Nishkam Karma.
Yes, that will happen only with Viveka.
Okay.
Only when Viveka Khyati happens and you are now clear that you are not your body, then you will stop doing actually what your body wants you to do. See, when you are doing paropkar to somebody, like you feed the poor, you are feeding the body of that person. You are not feeding the soul of that person, right? So you are just doing things for matter with material things. So that will only give you sukha. So it is a good deed and it will give you sukha in your body. But if you want to escape your body, then you have to realize that this is not me.
And feeding somebody, is it a Nishkam Karma or
No. Like I told you, it has that hidden desire inside you
of Sukha?
of sukha. If you have gone beyond that and you are saying that this gives me mukti, then that is your next kamna, that this will give me mukti.
Yeah, so it's quite complex, and whatever we have discussed so far, and the analogies and everything that you have given about Sankhya Darshan, so the subject seems very complex. So do you think that general public will be able to understand or gain some insight from it, and will it be relevant in their day-to-day life?
So you're very right. Sankhya is a very difficult subject, and the logic, the rationale which has been given at every step, those are obviously very complex because the subject is complex. And if it was easy, then other people would already know whatever is written in Sankhya. However, the every small thing makes a difference. So it's not necessary for a lay person to understand everything in the Shastra. You have to do multiple readings. I have read probably Sankhya 5 times. So you have to read it again and again and again.
And every time you read, you'll find something new
Something new.
from the same book.
Exactly. You would have experienced it yourself. So, from the very lay person to the biggest scholar, every time you read, you will find something new. So, it is very much worth it. And I would say, specifically for young people in particular, that there's so many superstitions now which have spread through multiple religions, not only Hinduism, but Hinduism is probably the biggest one with the biggest number of superstitions. All your superstitions will be shed once you read texts like this, because you start understanding what life is about, what are the things which you have to do, what is your kartavya, what is your akartavya, what you need to do, what you don't need to do, and what is your ultimate goal.
People generally have different ideas about dharma. Like somebody considers going to the temple and chanting some mantras to be related to dharma,
Yeah.
whereas it is not. It can be a part of being into a dharmic culture,
Yeah.
but not dharma itself.
Yes.
Dharma means doing the righteous thing, as you have clearly mentioned it,
Yeah.
and which contributes to the progress of yourself, your family, the society where you live in, the country, the nation where you live in, and the entire world. So that is dharma.
Yes.
Doing anything that can contribute to this idea. For an example, if there is an invader and they are attacking you and you are just worshipping the god and expecting the god to come and save you, is not dharma. Your dharma in that time is to pick up a sword and fight for your
Correct,
life, your
correct.
country, your family.
Absolutely.
That is dharma.
Yes.
So, ma'am, it has been a wonderful discussion with you. And again, on behalf of the entire team of Vartalap Studios, I thank you and your husband, as he has also accompanied you from Bengaluru to Delhi. And it was very wonderful to meet you, to discuss about Sankhya Darshan. Even before this podcast, we gained a lot of useful insights from you, ma'am. Thank you very much for coming here.
I'm very happy that you invited us, Kushvinder, and it was really wonderful interacting with your team. All your members are so committed. It is a pleasure for me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Namaste.